Have you ever been frustrated that your business it keeps hitting up against this eight-figure ceiling? How do you break through 10 million in your business? Maybe you're not quite there and you're wondering, well, what does it take to get to 10 million, stay at 10 million, or get your next 10 million if you're already there? On this episode of Business Builders, we're diving into the 5 relationship moves you need to make that are going to help you get there and stay there so that it's sustainable. We've seen this time and time again with clients that we've worked with who cross that $10 million mark or cross it and then go to the next, they go to 20 and then 30 and 40, and then everything falls apart. And it always comes down to the same thing, which is the relationships. If you've been watching, and if you haven't, make sure you go to the description, you watch the past 2 episodes of Business Builders where my wife Heather and I, we talked about the inner circle. I gave the analogy of a bullseye. That inner circle is your relationship with your significant other, your spouse. If you run a business and you're single, then it's you. Your business is an extension of that. The next circle out is your family. You got to keep those relationships safe, healthy, protected because your business grows and thrives out of that. If you're not thriving at home, you will eventually you have a business that is not thriving, or you will lose one and then you'll lose the other ultimately. Now we're going to go out to the third circle, which is the relationships within your organization. How do you manage those? What are the 5 key moves that we've seen over the last collectively? I mean, we've been consulting individually 10 plus years. Collectively, I mean, there's about 35, 40 years of business consulting and scaling knowledge here. And what we've seen consistently is that it all comes down to the relationship. We can trace every single problem in a business down to some level of relationship in one of those 3: outer, mid, or inner circle. So I'm going to pose the question to the team. We had a little conversation before this with the folks who are live on Zoom already. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you can always join us live on Zoom. Go to the description under the video or above the video if you're on Facebook and sign up for the weekly call. You'll get the reminders. That way you can hop on. We go live about 10-15 minutes early to answer questions and give a little more one-on-one coaching. But I posed the question, what are the biggest hangups that we've seen in regard to relationships within a business? And it was things like a lack of clarity, dreams versus vision, not communicating the vision, not following through and executing. Some folks that are live with us on Zoom said not wanting to hurt the feelings of people on your team. That's a real thing. If you truly care about your people, you're going to care about hurting their feelings. Some people brag about firing people.
Depends on your personality, I think.
Your finance and accounting people really get down to the brass tacks and they're like, look, it's numbers. Your math isn't mathing. Can't justify your salary anymore. And then they pass it on to someone like Kirk, who has to have that hard conversation.
Softens the blow.
Yeah.
Gotta soften the blow. So the 5 moves. This is what we've seen consistently, and not only what we've seen, this is what we consistently work on with clients that completely transforms their business. We have clients who their business was falling apart, they were about to go bankrupt, and we went back and started fixing all the logistical things, reducing the team, cleaning up the finances, improving the offers and the services so that they're more profitable. But amidst doing all of that, we never neglect to go back to the business owners. And many of the clients, most of the clients we work with, they are husband and wife owners. And so we prioritize that. I think every client that we've worked with recently in this past year, we've at some point told when things were hard, go away from the business. Just go and be with each other, spend time together, reconnect at that level, and then bring that positive energy back into the business. Because it's like parenting. If we have tension in our marriages, and Tim doesn't have kids, but you have dogs, it's the same thing. If there's tension in your marriage, the kids, the dog, they notice and they see it. So we want to make sure that we protect that. So let's dive into these 5 moves. And I'm going to give you, this is not just our theory, I'm going to give you some tangible things here. So Gallup, they do a lot of research in different spaces. One of the things that they concluded is that people don't leave companies, they leave managers. And a lot of people have said that. It's often repeated. Don't leave companies, they leave managers. People will stay with a really great manager in a really bad company because at the end of the day, people value relationships. The statistic is this: 70% of employees say that their this is huge. Their sense of purpose is defined by their work relationships. That's coming from one of the big three consulting firms, McKinsey and Co. People
Yep.
literally define their purpose in life by their work relationships, which I think is interesting. You spend most of your time at work, more than you probably do on a regular basis with your family. So I want to pose a question to you guys. This is the first move. Develop your team members and build intentional relationships. How does that land for you guys? We'll start with Kirk.
I mean, I can't disagree. I mean, this is like my playground. Um, I think the the biggest thing with what you said is people do find a sense of meaning, purpose to to the work that they do. They want it to align with their values, and as much as we want to flip the script on that and say we need to have people that are aligned with the organization, the same is true for the other side of that equation. People need to be aligned with the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
If we're going to ask them to join our mission for 8 to 10 hours a day, 40 hours to 50 hours a week, and then that only leaves them 3 to 4 hours to invest in their personal time with their family, it's got to be a compelling mission.
Mhm.
There's got to be a vision that's big enough for them to see their success inside of the success of the business. So that foundational piece, it has to be centered around the mission, vision, and core values.
Yeah.
Those core values, and a lot of times I get in arguments, but I get pushback of values.
Mm.
Values versus core values. Values meaning something that you put on the back of your pickup truck, and it's integrity, it's fast response, it's things that your customers want.
Mm-hmm.
But core values are truly the behaviors necessary to be successful in your environment. And so when you look at the core values, the core of the organization, when you have true alignment with your people and the organization, and those things are almost synonymous with each other, that's where the synergy really takes place. And you have a collective unit moving in a
Mhm.
particular direction, and you don't see as many fractures. You still see fractures because at the end of the day, the most dynamic part of your business is people.
Yeah.
As much as we would love to put together this great idea of a perfect organization, when you put anything together with imperfect people, you're going to have fractures.
Yep. And I'll say it this way: show me an organization where all the relationships are perfect, and I'll show you an organization that is on its way to falling apart or is already falling apart. Just nobody's talking about it because they're all being too nice about it. And because things break down with people, that's why you have to build intentional relationships. Because I'll say it this way: building intentional relationships, what it truly means is finding the cracks, finding the friction, and continually working to smooth that out. Like
Yeah.
that's really what it is.
Yeah.
Tim has a thought.
I do. Don't know if it's the right time. What relationship is perfect when it's gone quiet?
None. Like that. That's a good point. I mean, if you're not fighting with your spouse, you're probably not growing together.
Yeah.
It means you're not finding, like what I just said, you're not finding the points of friction.
That's the same thing
Yeah.
in the workforce, is it not?
Mhm.
Where
Mhm.
there's always some friction
Hmm.
because there's always something that either your manager isn't providing to you or you aren't providing the manager, or an expectation that isn't being met.
Yeah.
Because there shouldn't be a perfect relationship. There should always be a level of friction.
It will tell you that where there's lax friction, there's silos.
Yeah.
And silos will
Ooh.
absolutely kill your business.
Yeah.
If there's a, I won't say who they are because it doesn't really matter. But there's this couple. They're very, very prominent, well-known figures, and she knows who I'm talking about because I had a lot of fun making fun of this couple. They're one of those celebrity influencer type couples. And they said we never fight. Like, and they smiled too much to make me comfortable. Like I don't trust people who don't argue, don't fight, never are displeased, if you're happy all the time, there's something wrong there. You're not living in the real world with the rest of us. So if you're, I mean, and that that's not to say that there aren't seasons in your business where things are just going phenomenally well. Like it's cranking, we're doing great, and you wake up one day and you're like, we're things are going smooth. We haven't had any friction. That's when you as a business owner should be saying, getting your team together and saying, hey, things are going really well.
What are we missing?
Yeah, what are we missing?
Yep.
Where do we create friction? Either things are going well because we're not seeing the friction, it's getting swept under the rug, no one's talking, or, and this can happen, everything is actually great. That's the perfect time to start pushing
Yeah.
for the next level when things are going great. Everyone's recharged, refreshed. All right, let's push again.
Yep.
So no, Kirk and I will always go back and forth with this specific question because he often goes to the mission, vision, and more importantly, the core values. And I often go to what is the business's strategy.
Mhm.
Particularly in today's day and age, a small business with 14, 15 people can do $1 billion. It's been done. Again, those are tech startups, but it is possible to do a vast amount of revenue with a very, very small team where the core relationships are very important.
Mhm.
And so as we start leveraging technology in order to make our employees even more efficient, the relationships become a lot more valuable. And so as we start answering this question, it really comes down to strategy, at least from our end, because it's really the strategy is what is our business not? And those are always things that we exclude because oftentimes when we're answering strategy, it's so much easier to talk about what we're not going to do
Yeah.
than what we're going to do. Because then you have definitive answers. I don't want to do that. So I'm going away.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of makes me think I would rather have people who are super clear on what they're for than what they're against. People who are just focused on here's what I'm against, here's what I'm not going to do.
Oh yeah.
It's often my personal belief. It's often a cover, a cop out for the fact that they don't know what they're for.
Yeah.
And those same people, whether it's in business or politics or anything, you'll find that they're against things that don't make any sense. Well, I'm against this and this. Well, those two things are in disagreement with each other anyway. So what are you
They're-
for?
Yeah, but
So
they don't know.
yeah, they don't know. So and be intentional with building the relationships with your team. That's the first move. And when we say intentional, look for the friction. So here's your action item from this. I want to give you with every one of these moves, here's an action step to take. This month, over the course of the next 30 days, identify, depending on the size of your company, 1 to 3 individuals within your company who who you believe have a high potential to be developed, and start to invest in their leadership development this month. Whether it's giving them a book, it's giving them a training, it's taking them out to lunch and talking about their goals. Start to invest intentionally, and then as you're doing that, look as if you're not sure who those 1 to 3 people are, look for who's really struggling, and look for who's doing really, really well and has no complaints and is never asking for help. That's someone who you need to pay attention to.
That is your flight risk.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's never the terrorist on the plane who makes the most noise. They're the most quiet until it's time to go.
What?
Hey, it's a horrible example, but it's true. They're always quiet. It's always nice.
Script this.
Sorry, this part doesn't make it into the Instagram reels. So, all right. So, a relationship move number 2. This is one that is going to cause tension for you because it's often the most difficult. Or on the flip side, some business owners find it very easy because they're doing it completely wrong. If you find it easy, you're doing it wrong. If there's tension, you're likely doing it correctly. And here's what I mean. The move is actually I'll read this first. This is an old African proverb. I'm sure you've heard it before. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. 86% of executives say that delegation boosts productivity, but only 30% actually do it effectively. And that's coming from Harvard Business Review. So why do 80% of executives, 86% believe that delegation increases productivity, but only 30% do it? It's because of that tension. To delegate, you have to really have the courage and the confidence in yourself as a leader to hand something to someone, knowing they're going to make mistakes and knowing you're going to show up to fill the gap. On the flip side, if you find it really easy, you're probably pawning things off on your team that they're not ready for and that you should be a part of. So I'll leave it at that. That's my comment. And then we'll start with Tim. I can always, if you watch the show enough, you'll notice when Tim has something brewing because it's in the eyebrows and the smirk. He's got something good.
Giving away my secrets. I think realistically, when I hear that statement, I actually think about how I delegate, and it's really in some of my career. It's when I've been given tasks from my managers. The most successful relationships I've had with my managers or with my direct reports is when I actively look at, this is what I need you to do. Go make your mistakes and finish the task before I make corrections. And it's the difference between micromanagement and delegation.
Yeah.
Because as the manager, you need to accept that they're going to make mistakes and be there to support them in them solving their own mistakes. Particularly in the accounting and finance world, it's okay for mistakes. The model will get corrected unless it's a dire situation. And then why are you delegating it to begin with? Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so that's really as a leader, that's one of the conversations you need to have internally is just, is this something that is pertinent to the business model that has to be done now?
Right.
Then why aren't I doing it? Because if I delegate it, I can accept that it's only going to get done at 80% and I'll need to finish it because 80% of somebody else's time so that I can invest 20% is perfectly fine. That's an acceptable model.
What I've seen a lot of times too with business owners or actually even managers, is the punting. And they just say, okay, this is your job. And there's no direction, there's no clarity, there's no expectation. It's just, it's no longer my problem, it's your problem. And if something messes up, it's, well, you did this wrong. It's your fault.
There's no end result.
Yeah.
This is what it should like go do your best.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think I have, at least in my career, I've had more managers who just give me stuff with no direction, and not to my own harm, but I'm smart enough to figure things out. And so I've been able to figure it out. And then I became the owner of it. The downside of that is I got very resentful oftentimes with my managers or even the business owners because I'm forced to take responsibility for something that I'm not getting paid for. That's not in my role. That's not in my expectations. And then the responsibility falls on me, but it's not even, I don't even own it.
So I think that's a really good point. And Matt had a good comment. He said once we made the change to coach people toward the fix versus fixing it, the team got far stronger.
Yes.
So with
Absolutely.
what Heather just said, I want to point out two things. If you have underperformers and you just delegate things to them, there's a fine line between delegating and dumping. If you just dump things to them, they will fail. And what poor leaders do is come back and say, well, why'd you do it that way? And they put more pressure instead of realizing, oh, that's my fault. I gave you too much and I didn't give you the support. So there's a testing. They should know it's okay to fail, like Tim was saying, but you're going to show up. But when you have top performers, and we've all been in this situation, sure, give it to me, I'll figure it out. But you lose respect from your top performers because they know that you should be supporting, and they top performers can feel when you're just when you're just dumping something, and you're
Dumping versus delegating.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're just dumping.
It's the abdication of ownership.
Yeah.
It's funny because if you abdicate, again, you create resentment. But if you empower somebody and hold them responsible and say, "Hey, I'm going to develop you," man, oh man, you would have a loyal follower on that person because you can advance. A lot of my career, I have taken non-accountants and turned them into accountants, and those are forever relationships that I will always have because they were so grateful that someone took a chance on them and just developed them as people in an organization. And now, oftentimes, they didn't stay in the organization because they were not given enough of a chance within the organization because there wasn't a big enough vision for them. But the amount of pride that those people had in what they did was phenomenal. I mean, and it creates really loyal followers. It really does. The downside is managers can only do so much.
Yep.
So if the leadership is broken above, that manager is only going to keep that performer happy for so long, and then they're gone.
So I'll wrap up this. Did you have a comment?
I think it's in the title. How do you take a manager from being a manager to a leader?
But yeah.
And I think you said it without saying it. It's once the manager becomes the lid to the team will either grow up in the organization or grow out. There's no two paths.
Yep.
Those are the only two that exist. You either grow up in the organization or you're growing out. And if somebody outgrows their management
Yep.
without being led, they will go somewhere else where they will either get leadership or they will get experience.
Yeah, that's good. What I was going to say, and it's right in line with that, because this move is delegate responsibility, and in doing so, you create opportunities to see who steps up. If you're dumping instead of delegating, delegating will create opportunities to see who steps up. Dumping will create opportunity for you to see who steps out because they realize you're not a strong leader. And that's the key. You don't have to be the greatest leader. You learn to, I mean, really great leaders just know how to recruit great people and then empower them and delegate the right way, still take responsibility, still be accountable to it, but they trust people, and that's what makes people loyal. Hey,
Yep.
they trust me. You guys all know you're smarter than me in certain things. We hire people who are smarter than us. So why are they loyal? Because they realize we trust them.
Yep.
And that's where the value is in the relationship. I don't ever want to be a leader who makes or allows someone to feel like, well, you need me. We're really doing you a favor. No, you're doing us a favor.
Yeah.
And it's a mutual thing. So here's your action item for delegating responsibility. Take inventory of your daily workload. I did this past month in January. Take inventory of your daily workload and delegate at least 2 tasks to someone on your team. I delegated probably at least 50% of things I was doing to our team because I got feedback from my team. Hey, we need you to be more free and focus on these things. And that's why you build a great team. So it's taking responsibility, accountability, hand those things off to people who are more capable. And often their 80% will produce more than your 100%. Because in reality, if you're doing all these things, you're not even giving your 80% to it. You're giving 20%, and your 20% isn't going to outdo the 80% of someone whose skill truly is in that thing.
I would add to the things that you decide to take off of your plate, make them be the stressful things that you're not good at.
Yeah.
That's the first thing you give away. It's
Yep.
things that you don't actually enjoy.
And again, fine line, delegating and dumping. I don't like doing this. Well, why? Is it because it's not something you should actually be doing, or because you're not as good at it as one of your team members could be, or is it something you should be doing, you just don't want to do it? I have to expense reports. I hate doing them, but if we're traveling, I need to do that. If I go and purchase software I need to do that. I can't just delegate that. Not yet.
But
Yeah.
how would you delegate that?
Executive assistant. Access to my email, go in there, find the stuff.
I'll say this: I'm working with a dental
Locked
practice,
into that one.
and if you want to test your own competency as a leader and as a doer, and before you transfer anything, what is your competency for doing it?
Yeah.
Again, to your point, if it's something you're not good at or efficient at, absolutely delegate that, but you still need to know how to do it and be able to go through the process. And I'll give you an example. You guys know this, but I'll share this with you. The transformational learning theory, TLT. It is a matter of knowing what and how people need to learn. And so the transformational learning theory is essentially this: you need to be able to tell somebody how to do something. You need to be able to show them what it looks like when it's done correctly. And then you need to give them an opportunity to do it in front of you. And that fourth step is the coaching. But until you get through, I've told you exactly what this is, and with this dental practice, it's SOPs. They need to, in order to scale, they have to chart out their SOPs. And so they are struggling mightily because they do everything very quickly and almost naturally, but they can't tell anybody how to do what they do to get the results that they're getting with patients.
Yeah.
And so this is where they're getting stuck. It's like, I'm an expert at this thing, but are you? If
Yeah.
you can't teach somebody and walk them through what you are doing and how you do it and then why you do it and then coach them to how to execute to 80%, you have not duplicated yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You have abdicated or you've dumped, and rather than delegate, you haven't given them an opportunity to be successful, even at a moderate level. They're just going to either go figure it out and then lose respect because you don't actually know how to do it, even from a macro level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're well, I know more about this process,
Mhm.
this thing, this opportunity than my manager.
Why don't I have their job?
Why
Yeah.
don't I
Yeah.
have the job?
Yeah.
Now I start applying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm reminded of this every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday when I when I go with the kids to martial arts. We're all in martial arts together. I've done martial arts for a long time, and one of the things I learned early on is when I earned my black belt rank, it wasn't now you're a black belt, you can just beat up anybody. No, my grandmaster, 10th degree, 40 years training said, now you start over because you don't truly master something unless you can teach that thing. Going back to what Kirk said. And one of the things I love about our instructor and any leader that I truly look up to as a great leader is even though they're in a position of teaching the thing, they make it a regular practice to step in and do that thing with whoever they're teaching, with their team, with their students, because it also helps refine them and it creates that connection. We have Zach who's here on the call, and Zach's learning a new process of sales. He's had his own business, he's done sales, he knows how to do that, but he's learning a new process of how we do sales at Altru, and I've done it for the past 6, 7 years, this process, but now I'm teaching it to him. And so what I have been doing is I've been getting back into it. I've been stepping back in and reaching out to people, cold prospecting, sending the messages, refining scripts, rebuilding, and then showing him, here's screenshots, here's the conversation, here's how it converted. Okay, now let's talk this through. And so there's been a lot of feedback. But what I love about it, and what you have to remember as a business owner, whatever you do, make it make it intentional to step back in with your team and get a little practice time in with them, because not only does it keep you sharp and you know how to do the thing, it also shows them, oh wow, you know how to do the thing. You're not just telling me and you're not just the business owner, but you can actually do this.
And
Yep.
I'll add to that if you get to the point where, again, when you're small, the expectation is you know your team members. If you're able at a higher level and as an executive, go step into someone else's role at an entry level and know that process and know that person's name, what a difference it's going to make in your organization as you grow. Because oftentimes as you grow, your leadership team goes further and further distant from the process, and that will end up killing you over time.
Yep.
It will.
Yeah. They think you're just up there collecting dividend checks and distributions, but you step back in there and you get on a sales call, you go fix a spreadsheet. I don't know how you guys talk about it. You go in there and you have a an exit conversation and transition someone out. You gain that respect because they realize, oh, okay, she still knows how to do this. Wow, I didn't think they were this involved. And it's the 20% that just creates all of this relationship equity. And I hope this is clear. Like, it's building relationship. Like, Gary Vee does this really well. I've always respected him for this. He does 5-minute meetings with like every person in the company. And they're 250, $300 million company. And he does 5-minute meetings constantly with people just to connect. And that builds so much equity. Like, that will be a part of my intentional relationship building as we grow, is doing that. So right now I would obviously do longer meetings. Don't do that when you have like 10 team members. Like, you can spend more than 5 minutes with each person. So there's your action step. Delegate 2 things. Relationship move number 3. Um, these all build on each other. So the first one was be intentional about building relationships. The way to do that is by delegating responsibility, create opportunity for others to step up. Don't dump it because you're creating opportunity for them to step out. The third one, in doing those first 2, you now have identified that your key players, you can elevate them, and now you're actually duplicating yourself. You need to have someone in your organization who can do what you do. I'll give for example, we practice what we preach. Everything we're telling you to do, we practice and we'll continue to practice. So Zach is on the team. I was handling all sales. Now Zach is learning the sales process within Altru. Eventually he'll take that over. but he's not the only one. Kirk also has background in sales. So while we're doing a lot of things in marketing and sales right now, Kirk's involved in that, and he's on a lot of those calls that I'm on with the marketing team. So he's staying up to speed with it. So let's say I have to be out of the business for a while, and we have a lot of sales calls booked. I know Kirk can step in and take those calls,
Yep.
and support Zach. So we already have those bases covered. If it's a finance thing, Tim and Heather both have many of the same skills, and they could carry each other's responsibilities for a time. On the HR side, I mean, it's just hugging people, so we can do that. That's easy.
Yes. So simple, straightforward.
I finally get to take a shot at Kirk. If you watch the show long enough, you see
That's a
it's always
bad
marketing to
shot.
take shots.
I don't think Heather and I want to
I
be
don't.
in Kirk's role.
You
So
would want
you are
to
man up.
do HR.
I think I could do it. I think I could do it. Kurt might have to come up and fix some HR issues that I created.
I'm an HR risk, so that's kind of
So is AJ.
Matt just said, just downplay the hardest part of business. All right, so move number 3 is duplicate yourself. The best leaders don't create more followers; they create more leaders. That's Tom Peters said that. Here's another statistic to give to you. Companies. This is from Deloitte, another one of the big consulting firms. They get paid billions of dollars by the biggest companies in the world to gather data and research so they can make their business decisions. And here's what they said about structured leadership development programs. Companies that have those structured leadership development programs have 2 to 3 times higher revenue growth in terms of the amount and also the time of having that revenue growth, because you don't grow a business. You grow people, develop people, and they grow your business.
100%.
So, and we've seen, I mean, we joked about Kirk and I were, when we were on the same consulting team in a different firm, we were working with a client who had a $5 million business and then was just a very poor leader. Like it was just, and we worked with him, really tried to instill these things like do this, like try to inspire him. He just wouldn't do it because he was focused on the money. I mean, there were red flags, things that were like borderline illegal. Like we were saying, guy, you can't do this. This is going to cause so much trouble. Well, he went on to take over a $40 million company. So we would joke, he's gonna scale that down to $5 million because
it's a 10.
yeah, he's gonna grow it from 40 to 10. And unfortunately, that's the kind of thing that happens because he didn't know how to duplicate himself. And sometimes, depending on the leader you are, you have to be honest and realize there are certain things about yourself you should not duplicate. I know I have enough introspection that I can identify within myself things that I will not duplicate. So there are things I don't touch. Like things I won't duplicate. I'll be like, hey, can you guys teach this person how to do this? Because otherwise they're gonna do it my way. My way works for me, but it's not gonna work for them. It's not gonna work for the company. They're like it does.
You think it was for you.
And have an honest team. Have an honest team.
Well, I'll dovetail into that. So if you look at the way that we, even with the onboarding, Zach can speak to this a little bit, but the TLT is baked into the onboarding plan. As we grow and scale, we're walking clients through this right now, but the top performer elevation plan requires somebody to laterally lead somebody else before they take on the responsibility and the ownership of that next role. So since we're talking sales tonight, in this scenario, we have a top performing salesperson that unfortunately or fortunately, the business needed a sales manager. This person has been elevated into a sales manager role without management experience. And so what we're seeing right now is this disconnect between how to manage former peers as performers with behavior. So making that shift, if there's not a section in that elevation plan where they are of lateral leadership, meaning they are more of a mentor and mentee relationship and bridging the gap between going from a co-worker to a team member, you're able to take ownership of the mentorship without taking ownership and responsibility for the results of that team. You're still actively in a sales role. They're still actively in a sales role, but we incentivize that sales leader to be a mentor and use their time to, okay, if you're going to lose one sale a month because you're now in a mentor role, we'll make it up in incentive programs. But I want to put that person in a position to where they're a top performing salesperson. But if I just put them in a manager role, they're not only going to not be selling.
Right.
So I've just taken my top performing salesperson out, but now they're an underperforming manager. And you've taken this person that is used to succeeding in your environment, and now they're perpetually kind of fumbling into failure. And so that is another situation where we see it often, where you elevate without the delegation and without that lateral leadership step, to where you have somebody that was a top performer, a great revenue driver in the business, that now leaves the business because they get tired of failing for 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week.
And as you said that, I thought there's a difference, and this is key. There's a difference between delegating or elevating, how you elevate someone. So John Maxwell defines leadership as influence. Leadership is influence.
Yep.
So if you're going to elevate someone to a position of leadership and they're a key performer, you have to elevate them intentionally and strategically, meaning what most business owners do is they elevate that person's position, but they never took the time to elevate their influence. Put them in a position of influence. They don't have the position by title, but you keep pushing them up front. You're praising them for what they're doing. You're giving them opportunity to be that lateral mentor, and then you're supporting them in that, because once they get to the position of leadership and influence, if they don't have the relational influence, that's where John Maxwell talks about the different types of leadership. Do they follow you because of your position, or do they follow you because they want to follow you because you have influence? And that's your job as a CEO, as a business owner, is to elevate that person appropriately and set them up for success. I remember having those conversations with one of the best leaders I ever worked with. She literally told me, I want you to have more influence so that when you get to this position, the team is already willing to follow you. And by the time I was elevated to that position, I already had all the influence. It not to toot my own horn, but it just made sense to everyone. Other people interviewed, everyone knew AJ's getting the job because I already had the influence and I was set up for it. So do that intentionally.
Yeah.
That's also a double-edged sword, because if you give someone enough influence and there isn't a role for them to be elevated to, when they have a ton of influence, they will also step out. Speaking from experience, it does happen a lot where you'll give someone too much influence. But going back to the sales consideration, oftentimes what we see, particularly in sales teams, because that's often where there's the most turnover in leadership because of the lack of development. When you elevate someone into a leadership role and they don't have the influence to manage the team, you'll actually hurt their influence as they're an underperformer, because everyone on their team and everyone in the company will know that they are an underperformer. And so it makes it even harder for them to garnish the influence required to lead to the metrics or manage to the metrics versus managing to the relationship. And so you'll actually cause the problem to continuously compound, because if they can't lead through the influence of the metrics, they'll lead by the relationship. But the very fact that they're leading by their relationship causes the problem.
Yeah, there's layers to that.
I also say, even too, from a confidence perspective, you had mentioned failing 5 days a week all day long. Not only do you not, it's dangerous because as a person, if I get elevated to manager and I'm like, I suck as a manager, but then I'm not selling as much, well, now I suck as a salesperson. So I just suck in general as a person. And guess what? That attitude coming to work every single day, that bleeds into your entire team.
100%.
And there's always in the group, the best business book I've ever read that I read is the Bible. There's always a Judas. There's always someone who's waiting for the top performer to fail so they can slide in. And then it's typically a person who has a charismatic personality, which is why you don't elevate the people with the most charisma. And they tend to have influence. You've got to look for those integrity things. You've got to look for, how do they show up when they mess up? How do they respond when they make a mistake? Like, you've got to be really intentional. We don't have time to talk about it here, but there's a lot in that to evaluating the person that you elevate, and that's why, going back to what Tim said, you have to literally intentionally put them in positions where you delegate responsibility, and you create opportunity for them to fail so you can observe how they respond. Do they take it and own it, or do they put it on everyone else?
For
If
sure.
they blame everyone else, that's not a leader. That's a manager who is going to tear apart your team. And now, like Tim said, it compounds. You have to deal with that person. You have to deal with the outfall. You have to deal with the Judas coming in and trying to swoop in and take over. And then all the people who thought they liked that person, but now they're seeing how they really are. And now they hate them. Now you've just completely ruined your culture. It's a
So we're going around in circles, but I mean, to sum up this point, I think it's being very careful on who we're promoting and who we're elevating into leadership roles, and being mindful of the influence that any one person on your team has, and being very mindful of who you are allowing or who you are supporting
Yeah.
in their gain of influence in your business, particularly in the smaller teams, because the influence often has more power than the title itself.
Yeah.
And
and it
that
yeah.
is a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah. A great resource before we move on to the next point is Becoming a Person of Influence by John Maxwell. It's one of his older books. You probably won't see it on the bestseller list on Amazon, but it's from, I think the original was in the 80s. It was revised in 96, and that was the last time. But it's an unbelievable book. Actually, it's a very believable book.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great resource, but it really goes to the heart of everything that we're talking about in these first 4 points of becoming that person of influence, and not because of your role, but because of your responsibility for other people's success.
Yeah. So your action step with that move is very similar to the last one, which is find someone that you can one team member you can give a key responsibility to. So now we're looking at layers of 3 people. Give your tasks away, and then identify from those people. It's a process. Who can I give a key responsibility to see how they manage that, and if I can trust them more. To quote the Bible, he who's faithful in little is faithful in much. Give them a little bit, let them test it, let them try it, and then give them more. So move number 4. We'll go through this one quick, and then we'll go to number 5. The reason you do those 3 things is because you have to deepen your bench. I said earlier, if I get taken out or whatever for 2 weeks, Kirk can step in and do sales. Zach is already learning our sales process. If Heather's sick, Tim can step in, and that's happened already actually, where we've had to step in for each other. So we have a deep enough bench, even with a smaller team. You've got to be thinking about that. That's why, on the basketball team, there's 5 players on the court, but you've got 12, 10, 12, 15 players on the team. And a football team, you've got the kicker, but you also have the backup kicker and the backup quarterback. They almost never play, but they have to be there in case something happens. And I don't know sports well enough to say, but I know there's been secondary kickers and quarterbacks who became the quarterback because something happened to the other quarterback, and they were given an opportunity, and they killed it.
They have to.
Yeah.
They have to. You don't want to be the second kicker and suck. Like, everyone expects you to suck, so you might as well show up and do a good job. So build
You don't
a
expect
high
me to suck.
performance team of A and B players. Not everyone's an A player. Not everyone's a number 1. That's fine. You have a mix. And that's what great coaches know. You want to build an all-star team, you got to have a couple all-star players, and the rest are really strong supporting players. Same thing if it's in a movie. Whatever context you want to put it in, you've always got your leading roles, and then you've got your supporting roles. And I would love to be one of those actors who's just a supporting actor. But there are some actors out there who have amazing careers, and if they're in a movie, I'll watch it, but they're never the lead. They're always the supporting actor.
Hmm.
Because those roles are actually really important.
I think the importance of again, I wouldn't necessarily say A, B, or C players. It's just everyone. If you're a team, everyone has a role, and that role should be important, and that role is integral to the business. So if just like a team, every player may not be on the bench, or sorry, every player may not be on the court at all times, but there is something that is unique to that person that provides something that the team needs. That if that's not being brought, the team would be incomplete. It would not perform well.
Well, the reason I say A, B, and C players, and I think you're being nice, is because not every you have to evaluate. Kirk does an exercise with clients typically when there's crisis, and we need to look at um, consolidating the team and shrinking the team down for whatever reason, or they're overstaffed, or there's people in the wrong seats. We call it the Jonah journey. You start looking at uh, how much value each person brings within their role, meaning how well do they perform their role, and is it up to the minimum standard that's needed. Phil Jackson, he was the coach for was it the Bulls,
The
Yes.
the
Bulls.
Chicago Bulls,
And the Lakers.
Yeah.
and the Lakers. I don't watch unless dudes are punching each other in the face. I'm not watching
Anyway.
that sport.
Then-
Anyway,
Then we
all
can't
these
use these examples. If
I
we
can use
can't-
them because they're good. They're just good. This is I got to edit this out now. So he said the strength of a team is each individual member. The strength of each member is the team. I remember writing a quote for myself to try to explain this because I'd actually never read this quote before, preparing it for tonight. But so I just said, hence why AJ doesn't head up HR. Exactly. I wrote this quote for myself, and I said, individual success is a team effort, and team success is an individual effort. So it's knowing where you're at, but you have to rank your people, because if you have someone who's a C player, your job is to develop them and get them to a B.
Mhm.
They're a B, get them to an A. And if you're not honest about that, well, everyone's special, everyone's a snowflake. No, they're not. You have employees and they suck. And you either need to develop them or you need to get rid of them. And you've got to be honest about that, because at one point I was a D player. I was like I was a D-list actor in the movie that was the workspace, and couldn't get a job for 14 months when we first got married. Like, no marketable skills, but people started. I developed skills, and I elevated to. I'd say I'm an A player now.
Here's why I say don't say A, B, or C. We know internally from leadership, yes, they're A, B,
Yeah,
and
don't
C.
tell
You're
your
telling
team this.
people
Don't rank them. There's a hilarious episode of The Office where Robert California, he's the new CEO, and he makes a list and ranks people, and then they find it, and they're all freaking out. Like, what's going on? What's this list mean? Don't do that to your people. We're talking CEOs to CEOs, business owners to business owners. Um,
But there is an opportunity to rank your people,
mhm.
and not necessarily rank them in the sense of ABC, but just like I baseball background. So you look at a roster and you have some guys that are better at base hitting versus power. You have some people that can have a great on base percentage, but maybe they don't have a great batting average. So you look at this mix of where your people's strengths and weaknesses or opportunities for growth are, and you stack rank them, not to rank them against each other, but just to get an average of where your people sit. If I've got a remarkable salesperson that's great at building relationships, but they can't close anything, they might be a 4. They might rank 9 at customer relationship, but a 2 at closing the deal. I need to spend more time because while their average is 6, I need to spend more time at training them at closing the deal,
Mhm.
because if we don't leverage their strength for their opportunity, they're going to blow out. The whole point to going through Jonah Journey or any of these stack rankings is to build that roster. You need to have people that have strengths in one of 3 areas, so you understand where your people are, where their strengths are, and how the business can leverage those strengths, but where the business can invest in those opportunities
Yeah.
to create space to fail safely.
Hmm. Yeah. So here's the stat, because I'm giving you one for each. So, we're not just making this up. This is our experience, but there's data to prove it. This is again from Gallup. High performing teams increase profitability by an average of 21% compared to teams with disengaged employees. Why? Because high performing teams produce more in less time, more efficiently, less cost. I mean, a lot of you are in home services. There's labor involved. You got technicians. If they're going out and doing a job and they're top performers, they will do in 2 hours what it would take an underperforming team 4, 6, 8 hours. We've literally had clients who would say we had a team that took them 8 hours to pave a driveway, and we got this new team and they do it in 2 hours.
Yeah.
You just increase profitability and you have great people. So here's the
Say that
action.
stat again.
What's that?
Say that stat again.
High performing teams increase profitability by 21% compared to disengaged employees.
Interesting. Disengaged employees, also a Gallup poll, is 67% of your employees. So the top 30% increase your business by 20%.
So here's the action item. Evaluate your team, rank them A, B, and C, develop your A and B players, and have a plan. Have a plan to develop your A, B players, and have a plan to phase out your C players.
But
That's
do it in private.
Yes.
do it in private. Yes. Do not let them see this list. Do not let them watch this episode. Don't do that yourself.
Praise in public,
Yep.
train in private.
All right. The final move, if you've done all four of these, the final move is what all of this culminates into, which is dominate your market, meaning building a team that scales without you. And this is so important. We've seen clients of all the different sizes that cannot scale past where they're at. And if you're not scaling and growing, you are in decline by default. There's only two ways to go. So they're in decline because they might have an offer that can scale. They might have processes that can scale, but they don't have a team that can scale. Because in business, everything is executed by people. Unless you run an AI business, which none of you likely do, it's executed at some level by people, it's managed by people. And if you don't have people to manage those things, or you don't have top performing people, you limit your scalability. And Michael Gerber, who wrote the E-Myth, EOS operating system, said this: a business that relies on the owner is not a business, it's a job. And I'd say it doesn't matter what the revenue is.
Yes, but at the same time, you can fix it.
Yeah, you absolutely can fix it. That's the whole point of this episode. How do you fix that? What do you do? But what are the ways to go about fixing that?
First, you have to understand that you have to acknowledge that it's a job. And that's often the hardest thing. Most business owners, as they're looking at their business and they're like, I am 100% scalable. And we step in and we look at the business and we understand that they're actually not, because they're the limiting factor, or one of their leaders is the limiting factor on their organization. Until you fix that issue in the business is actually going to cause more pain to anyone in the organization if you actually try to scale. And so
Growth of the business would break the business.
Yeah.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah.
we see it a lot, because what happens is, again, businesses scale because you're stacking processes on top of processes on top of processes, but someone has to own all of those processes. And so when we're looking at clients that think they're set up for scale and are pushing into the market trying to dominate it, what happens is one process breaks. And because there isn't a system to catch the business from a revenue standpoint, you actually drop back and then you enter a cash crunch because your costs far outweigh, because you can't cut costs as quickly as your revenue can drop.
Yeah.
And so you have to keep
Yeah.
pushing money out the door while you're trying to fix the inflow of clients in order to bring money in the door. And so it creates a spiral effect where you're actually hurting the business by thinking you can scale when you can't.
Yeah.
And so the first step is to acknowledge that, okay, if I can't take a 2-week or a 3-week vacation, I have a job.
Yeah.
If I have to be in every single leadership meeting, I have a job. And understanding that you have a job, and then going through and identifying who on my team is a good enough performer that I can delegate tasks to.
Yeah.
So that I'm only spending 5 hours a day working in my job. And then I'm only spending 4 hours a day. And it's ratcheting back the time you're investing in your job and thinking about the business as its own entity so you can step away. The first thing is identifying that you have a job. The second thing is identifying is how you can get out of that job.
That's really good. And I'll say this real quick before you give your thought. Businesses, this is coming from Forbes. I think we'd all agree Forbes knows a lot about business. They got some good people over there and a lot of data. Businesses with strong teams and leadership scale not 1, not 2, but 3 times faster than businesses led by a single dominant figure.
Yeah.
And now let's put it in a different context to prove this is true. All the empires led by a dictator eventually fell. It just doesn't work having one person make all the decisions. But then you look at great leaders, they built teams, they recruited people, they built hierarchy, they leaders developed leaders. Jesus recruited 12 guys and 11 of them did really well, despite the one guy trying to sabotage it, and it literally impacted the entire world. There's a structure to it, like great leadership. You can't be the single dominant figure, and a lot of business owners take pride in that. Like I do everything I do. That's not a badge of honor. Mature business owners who've built a great team and a business that is a well-oiled machine that runs really efficiently look at that and shake their head like you're not winning because you do all the things. Take pride in that you can, but don't take pride if you are doing the things, because it means as soon as you're out of the game, it's over and you've lost everything. So
I don't remember what I was going to say.
Well, I will say it because I think it's funny. But even with Jesus, he hired 12, and the one that got fired, he self-selected out.
yeah. Yep, because there was a strong culture, strong enough culture that guy decided to opt himself out. So here's your action step for move number 5: dominate your market, build a team that scales without you. You want to be the leader. Set a 90-day goal to step out of at least one major operational role and have your team run it. Something major. I have a 90-day goal to completely step out of the marketing execution and sales within our company and just focus on creating content, the things that only I can do that have to come from me. That is my 90-day goal by the end of Q1. And I'll say this as well. Actually, I'll pass to you guys for final thoughts because I have another thought that just left my mind, and when I catch it, I'll say it.
I think for this with the team part, I think we talked about it before the call or this show even started, but the difference between responsibility, accountability, and ownership, because those are big
Oh, yeah.
things when it comes to teams. If you are a business owner and you are going to step out of your business, you have to appoint people who are not only accountable to processes, but who actually own the processes. And
Yep.
oftentimes what happens is when the business owner steps out, as they step out, they appoint this one person to replace them. And they're like, okay, I W the next leader. But then there are different people in the organizations that own different processes that may have nothing to do with this appointed leader. And then when there is chaos or confusion because a process is broken, now you're searching for someone to figure out how do we fix this. And sometimes you'll have two scenarios. One person will take responsibility and take ownership and fix it. Or if you don't have that clarity, you have nobody taking responsibility for the process, and it continues to break and continues to fail, and your business will slowly die because of it.
Yeah. So we have a gift for all of you guys here. And even if you're watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment and comment the word Matrix, like the movie, Matrix. And here, for those of you live on Zoom, YouTube, Facebook, comment the word Matrix. And what Zach will do is he'll reach out to you, and we're going to send you, we call it the level 7 operator matrix. There are 7 levels of value contribution within an organization, and it applies to your team members, but also to you as a business owner. And it goes from the very lowest level of contribution, which is your employees, to the very highest level, which is where you aspire to get, where you're no longer working in your business. You're really not even just working on it. You've moved to the place of legacy building. And what the matrix shows you is the different characteristics, roles, responsibilities, paints the picture, what it should look like, so you know where you're at and where you should go next. How do you make these 5 moves, and what should it look like within your organization? So we put that together for you. It's a completely free resource. Just drop the word matrix in the chat, in the comments, and we'll get that out to you. And hope you guys got value. Let us know if you got value. Just give us a thumbs up. Those of you who are live, you can leave a comment, say yes, I got value, and then we'll get that over to you. So I see the comments coming through. Awesome. Cody will get that to you. Matt will get that to you. John will get that to you, and everyone else who's leaving a comment. So if you're not subscribed on YouTube, go to YouTube now. Get off Zoom, go to YouTube, get off Facebook, go to YouTube and subscribe. All the replays are there, so you can go back and watch this, because there's a lot of good value packed in here. And I'm gonna shout out my team. I don't tell them anything other, and they don't always like this. I don't tell them anything other than
Never.
I never tell them anything other than what the topic is. because if you truly know how to help business owners, in our case, you shouldn't have to prepare. You should be able to give those answers on the fly. And everything they're answering here is from experience. And so if you got value, know that that's what we're here for, to just give you real value. The only one who knows the questions, the only one who knows the outline of what we're talking about is me. They're as prepared as you are for this. So
Which I think I would at least get an insight because I'm the closest to you, but I don't
nope,
even.
nobody gets
I'm
the
last to know, literally.
nobody gets the insight. So we appreciate you guys. We love you guys. And we're fighting for you to give you so much value on this, more than we probably should, but we're okay with that as long as it helps you. So go subscribe on YouTube, and we'll see you on the next episode of Business Builders next week, every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern.